Hey, Sam from 3D here. Today we will talk about UV unwrapping. This is the process of taking a 3D object and representing it in 2D. This is done so we can texture the object. To simplify, for technical reasons, we can't do a 3D texture, so we need to turn the model into 2D version of it. On 3D, we already use X, Y and Z coordinates. W is used for some types of rotation. So here we use U and V axis. This is done to every 3D object we intend to texture later on, unless your model requires only a simple shader like single color. In Blender, you can also set the texture coordinates as object or generated, and depending on your model, this will be enough. This is also UV unwrapping, just a different type of it, and it's mostly used to procedural texture, which we'll talk about more in a later video. Think of UV wrapping as making an origami. You start with a flat piece of paper and build the model by folding, cutting and gluing pieces. If you print the paper before doing the process when you are done folding, you will have a fully colored origami. UV unwrapping is the same, just the other way around. You start with the finished 3D model and we will cut it to make it into a 2D paper version. Before going any further, it's worth noting that most 3D modeling softwares out there have an automatic UV unwrap option. This is really useful for many objects, but for others you likely need to do it manually. The process is done by selecting edges and making them seam. As the name implies, a seam is where the computer will quote-unquote cut the mesh. The best places to cut the mesh is where you won't see it. For example, in t-shirt, we can clearly see where the seams are. On models like a rock, where you can't really hide the seam, you will need to experiment where it blends better or try to blend it in the texture. After we select the seams and create the UV map, the model is now ready to be textured anywhere, be it Blender shading system, Painter 3D or just old-fashioned Photoshop. We can use this colorful texture to verify if the UV has any deformity like stretched UVs or too small UVs that result in low quality. This one is called UV grid and this one color grid. This come with the Blender, but you can find others online by looking for UV checker. While the UV space is infinite, we'll be making textures with it, so if the UV is too small in this space, it will probably look blurry on the texture. Colorful maps also help you see that. There is correct way to scale this, called texel density, but it's not the point of this video. If you want to go more in depth, check the links at the description, but don't feel obligated to. Only do if you are really curious. Just make sure stuff is big enough so it doesn't look blurry, and prioritize what's important. This model has screws on it. What's more important, the screws or the face? Notice how the face and torso take a much larger portion of the UV map compared to the screws. Also, don't put UVs one on top of the other unless you want those UVs to have the same texture. If the object has multiple materials, you can overlap UVs without the problem, as long as material 1 does not overlap. Anything that also uses material 1, it can overlap other parts of the model that uses material 2. Don't go outside the UV area, otherwise that part will simply not be textured. So the main takeaways are, if the automatic UV works, there is probably no reason to do it manually. Don't overlap UVs unless you want the same texture on those overlapped UVs. Keep the same to hidden or natural place when possible. Make sure everything is big enough so it does not look blurry. Prioritize what's more important on the model. Multiply materials can be overlapped as long as they don't overlap the same material. And lastly, don't forget to have fun. It's an art field after all, and I know all of this can feel overwhelming, but if you are having fun, it's much more less frustrating. Try to keep yourself engaged and make some cool stuff. In the next video, we will put all of this into practice on an actual model. That was it. Thank you guys. If you want to learn more about Blender, jump to our YouTube channel, subscribe, give us like to beat the algorithm. We have so many cool 3D libraries. Go to 3D.design. If you want to be surrounded by like-minded people, go to our Discord server. Have a great day, stay creative, and see you next video. Bye.